how technology has always sparked fear and what actually happened. The fear of the unknown. From electricity to the internet, electricity's initial skepticism. When Thomas Edison opened the first commercial power station in New York City in 1882, medical professionals raised concerns about potential health risks, while newspapers ran editorials claiming that wiring homes would invite catastrophic fires. Critics, including some religious figures, argued that harnessing electricity defied natural law. These weren't fringe opinions. Medical professionals testified before city councils, and insurance companies often refused to cover newly electrified buildings due to fire risks. Property owners faced resistance when installing new systems. This fear was tangible, widespread, and expressed by educated people who genuinely believed they were protecting their communities from reckless innovation. What's striking isn't that people were afraid. It's that their fears seemed so reasonable at the time. The technology was unfamiliar. Electrical fires did happen in those early days. But as communities invested in education about proper installation, developed safety standards, and witnessed electricity's benefits firsthand, from lighting streets to powering hospitals, skepticism gradually gave way to acceptance. People didn't abandon their concerns overnight. They learned, adapted, and discovered that understanding reduced anxiety more effectively than avoidance ever could. This pattern of initial resistance, followed by gradual acceptance, offers us something valuable today: perspective. Our relationship with AI mirrors this same journey from fear toward understanding. The internet and cultural anxiety. The internet arrived with a different kind of panic, one centered less on physical danger and more on what it might do to society itself. During the 1990s, parents worried that their children would encounter predators online. Experts warned of information overload destroying our ability to think deeply, and privacy advocates predicted that personal data would be weaponized by corporations and governments. Tufekci, 2017. They weren't entirely wrong. What made internet anxiety distinct was its focus on invisible threats: the erosion of privacy, the manipulation of information, the potential for technology to fundamentally alter human connection. These concerns felt more abstract than the tangible risk of electrical fires, yet they generated comparable levels of cultural distress. Psychologists discuss terms like cyberphobia to describe the anxiety, while sociologists predicted the internet would isolate us from meaningful relationships. Rainey and Wellman, 2012. But something unexpected happened as the technology matured. We developed frameworks to address the legitimate concerns. Encryption standards emerged to protect privacy. Platforms created moderation policies. Parents learned to set boundaries. Schools taught digital literacy. The technology didn't become less complex. Our understanding of how to navigate it deepened. We built guardrails without abandoning the highway. What distinguishes reasonable caution from paralyzing fear is the willingness to engage with the actual mechanisms at work. Privacy concerns about the internet were valid then and remain valid now, yet billions of people have learned to use these tools while managing risk. Understanding doesn't eliminate danger. It provides agency. This matters because AI anxiety follows a similar contour. The fears are real, rooted in legitimate questions about autonomy, bias, and control. But avoidance won't resolve those questions. Lessons from historical misconceptions. Job loss fears have accompanied nearly every major technological shift of the past 2 centuries. During the Industrial Revolution, textile workers in England smashed machines during the Luddite uprisings, convinced automation would render their skills worthless and leave families destitute. They weren't imagining things. Many traditional weaving jobs did disappear. Yet what happened next defies the simple narrative of technology destroying livelihoods. The economy didn't collapse. Instead, it restructured. New industries emerged that no one had anticipated. Factory maintenance, machine design, logistics coordination, eventually entire sectors like automotive manufacturing and aerospace engineering. The transition wasn't painless, and individual workers often suffered during the shift. But the long-term pattern showed adaptation rather than catastrophe. Employment didn't vanish. It migrated and multiplied in unexpected directions. Mokir, 1990. When ATMs arrived in the 1970s, bank tellers braced for obsolescence, with some industry analysts predicting mass layoffs. The opposite occurred. Research by James Besson showed that banks opened more branches because ATMs reduced overhead costs, and full-time equivalent teller employment actually increased from the late 1990s through the early 2000s as roles shifted toward customer service and financial advising. Besson, 2015. Besson, 2015. This pattern repeats across technologies. Spreadsheet software didn't eliminate accountants. Word processors didn't end secretarial work. And the internet didn't destroy retail, though it certainly transformed all three. Jobs evolved rather than evaporated. What looked like replacement often turned out to be augmentation. With AI, we're hearing identical warnings, wrapped in modern language. The technology feels different because it mimics cognitive work rather than physical labor. But the underlying anxiety that machines will leave us without purpose or income echoes concerns from centuries past. History doesn't guarantee the future will unfold identically, but it does offer reassurance that societies possess more adaptive capacity than panic allows us to remember. Lessons learned: addressing legitimate concerns, understanding historical anxieties. Fear doesn't emerge from the technology itself. It grows from the gap between what we understand and what we imagine might happen. When people encountered electricity in their homes for the first time, the anxiety wasn't irrational. It stemmed from unfamiliarity with invisible force flowing through walls. We fear what operates beyond our comprehension, particularly when experts use language that reinforces our sense of exclusion rather than inviting us in. Misunderstanding accelerates when complexity meets secrecy. Early internet adoption suffered because technical jargon created artificial barriers. Terms like protocols, servers, and bandwidth functioned as gatekeeping language that made ordinary people feel the technology wasn't meant for them. The same pattern repeats with AI. Phrases like neural networks, machine learning algorithms, and deep learning can sound deliberately obscure, as if designed to keep us at arm's length from understanding. But here's what history teaches us. Education and exposure consistently dissolve technological fear. Communities that feared electricity eventually embraced it once they saw neighbors using it safely. Once electricians explained basic safety principles in plain language, once the mystery gave way to familiarity. The internet followed the same trajectory, from suspicious novelty to indispensable tool, not because the technology changed, but because our understanding deepened through experience and accessible explanation. Social factors matter just as much as psychological ones. When trusted voices, neighbors, community leaders, people who look and sound like us, share their positive experiences with new technology, anxiety diminishes. We're social creatures who calibrate our responses based on those around us. If everyone in our circle treats something as dangerous, we absorb that perspective. But when respected figures demonstrate confident, informed engagement, we gain permission to explore rather than retreat. This framework applies directly to AI. Your concerns deserve serious attention, not dismissal. The path forward isn't about eliminating caution, it's about transforming anxiety into informed awareness. Just as our grandparents learned that electricity could be harnessed safely and our parents discovered the internet's benefits, we can approach AI with both open minds and critical thinking, ready to understand rather than simply react. Effective responses to technology fears. Sweden provides one of the clearest examples of how societies can transform technological fear into informed adoption through strategic communication and inclusive education. In the 1960s and 70s, Sweden faced widespread anxiety about nuclear power, concerns amplified by limited public understanding and perceived government secrecy. Rather than dismissing these fears or forcing adoption, Swedish authorities created folkbildning, a national study circle movement that brought nuclear experts into living rooms, community centers, and workplaces across the country. Jameson, 1996. These weren't lectures. They were structured conversations where ordinary citizens could ask questions without feeling foolish, where technical specialists translated complex concepts into everyday language, and where disagreement was welcomed rather than suppressed. The goal wasn't persuasion, it was genuine understanding. People learned how nuclear reactors actually worked, what safety protocols existed, and what the real risks and benefits were. Some remained opposed after these discussions, but their opposition came from informed judgment rather than vague dread. This approach worked because it addressed the emotional roots of technological anxiety. When people feel excluded from decisions that affect their lives, fear intensifies. When they're brought into the conversation as valued participants rather than passive recipients, something shifts. The Swedish model recognized that trust isn't built through reassurance alone. It's built through transparency, accessibility, and respect for people's intelligence. Similar patterns emerged during the introduction of seatbelt laws across Europe and North America in the 1960s and 70s. Initial resistance was fierce. People resented government mandates about personal safety, questioned whether seatbelts actually worked, and worried about being trapped in burning vehicles. Public health campaigns succeeded not by dismissing these concerns, but by directly addressing them with evidence. Crash test demonstrations showed the physics of collisions. Survivor testimonials provided personal proof. Independent research confirmed effectiveness rates. What made these campaigns particularly effective was their willingness to engage with legitimate questions. Regulators acknowledged that, yes, there were rare scenarios where seatbelts might complicate escape, but the data overwhelmingly showed they saved far more lives than they endangered. Robertson, 2015. This honest, evidence-based approach didn't eliminate all opposition, but it created enough public understanding to support effective policy. Within a generation, seatbelt use became routine, saving countless lives. The lesson here applies directly to AI anxiety today. Fear dissolves when people understand both capabilities and limitations. When we replace speculation with information, when we welcome questions rather than deflect them, and when we build systems that genuinely serve human needs, technology stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like a tool we control. Recognizing patterns. How history informs our AI fears. Historical parallels in tech anxiety. When electricity first arrived in homes, people worried it would burn down their houses. When trains began crossing continents, some believed the human body couldn't withstand speeds over 30 miles per hour. Wolmar, 2011. The internet, in its early days, was going to isolate us from each other and destroy meaningful conversation. Nie and Erbring, 2000. Notice something. Each of these technologies sparked genuine fear, and each time those fears followed a remarkably similar pattern, the kind we're seeing again with AI. The pattern starts with unfamiliarity. New technology arrives without a familiar reference point. Your grandparents didn't have electricity to compare electricity to. They had candles and oil lamps. You don't have AI to compare AI to. You have computers that follow explicit instructions. When something fundamentally different appears, our brains default to caution. That's not paranoia. That's survival instinct doing exactly what it evolved to do. Then comes the speculation phase. Without direct experience, people fill the knowledge gap with imagination. During the Industrial Revolution, workers feared machines would eliminate all jobs. The printing press was going to destroy the art of memory and make people stupid. Caah, 2010. Television would turn children into passive zombies. Postman, 1985. Some of these fears contained grains of truth. Technology does change how we work and think. But the imagined catastrophes rarely matched what actually happened. Instead, societies adapted, found new equilibriums, and discovered benefits nobody predicted. The final pattern is perhaps the most important. Familiarity dissolves fear. As people actually used electricity, rode trains, browsed the internet, direct experience replaced speculation. The technology became ordinary, its limitations became clear, and life continued, different certainly, but not destroyed. Understanding this pattern doesn't erase AI concerns. It does something better. It gives you perspective to separate reasonable caution from unfounded panic. Societal reactions to disruptive tech. New technologies don't just arrive, they disrupt entire social ecosystems. When electricity spread through cities, it didn't merely replace gas lamps. It transformed work schedules, leisure activities, and even courtship rituals. People suddenly had light after dark, which meant factories could run longer shifts, families could gather differently, and public spaces became safer at night. The resistance wasn't just about fear of electrocution. It was about losing familiar rhythms of daily life. The internet followed a similar path. Early adopters faced skepticism, not just about technical reliability, but about fundamental changes to how people connected, worked, and spent time. Would online communication destroy face-to-face relationships? Would constant connectivity erode family dinners and neighborhood bonds? These weren't irrational worries. They reflected genuine concerns about social fabric. What happened next reveals the pattern. Societies didn't simply accept these technologies wholesale or reject them entirely. Instead, communities adapted through experimentation, conversation, and gradual integration. People developed new norms: when to use email versus phone calls, how to balance screen time with in-person interaction. The technologies themselves evolved based on user feedback and emerging needs. The shift from resistance to acceptance wasn't automatic. It required active participation from users, who shaped how these tools fit into their lives, demanded improvements, and insisted on safeguards. This same dynamic applies to AI today. Understanding it means engaging with it thoughtfully, not passively accepting whatever arrives. The role of media in shaping perceptions. One persistent trap keeps people from engaging productively with AI, confusing caution with understanding. When someone says they're staying informed by reading every alarming headline about AI threats, but never actually learning how the systems work, they're feeding anxiety rather than building knowledge. This creates a false sense of engagement, feeling informed while remaining fundamentally confused. The recovery starts by asking different questions. Instead of, "What could AI do to me?" try, "How does this specific AI tool actually function?" Instead of absorbing broad predictions about job displacement, examine what's happening in your own industry right now. Concrete investigation displaces abstract worry. Another common pitfall involves selective pattern matching. People notice historical examples that confirm their existing fears, while overlooking contradictory evidence. Someone worried about AI might fixate on stories about automation replacing factory workers, while ignoring how ATMs actually increased bank teller employment by making branches more affordable to open. Besson, 2015. They remember the panic around electricity, but forget how quickly those fears dissolved once people experienced its benefits firsthand. Media narratives amplify this selective attention. Sensational stories about AI dangers generate more clicks than measured analysis of gradual adaptation. A headline screaming, "AI could replace millions of jobs," gets far more traction than most industries, slowly integrating AI tools to augment human work. The former feeds fear. The latter requires patience and nuance. Breaking this pattern means actively seeking balanced perspectives. When you encounter an alarming AI story, pause before sharing it. Ask yourself, does this reflect actual current capabilities, or is it speculation about distant possibilities? Are there examples of similar technologies being integrated successfully? What would someone who works directly with this technology say? History shows us that fear spreads faster than understanding, but understanding lasts longer. Lessons from overcoming past fears. Moving forward doesn't require eliminating all concern. It requires converting anxiety into productive curiosity. You don't need to become an AI expert overnight. What matters is building enough understanding to recognize what's real versus speculation. And this happens gradually through small, consistent exposure. Start with one AI tool you encounter regularly. If your email suggests sentence completions, spend 5 minutes noticing how it works. What does it predict accurately? Where does it fail? This direct observation teaches more than a dozen articles about the future of AI. You're gathering evidence from your own experience rather than accepting someone else's predictions. Common obstacles will emerge. You might feel overwhelmed by technical terminology when trying to learn more. That's expected. Remember that experts once felt equally confused. The solution isn't avoiding complex information entirely. It's finding explanations pitched at your current level. YouTube channels explaining AI concepts to general audiences, library books written for non-technical readers, community workshops. These resources exist because many people share your questions. Another predictable challenge: impatience with your own learning pace. Understanding develops unevenly. Some concepts click immediately. Others require returning multiple times before they make sense. This isn't a reflection of your capability. It's how humans process genuinely new information. When electricity was introduced, people didn't grasp everything about voltage and current immediately. They learned enough to use it safely, then deepened understanding as needed. The most important shift is recognizing that staying informed about AI doesn't mean consuming every headline or mastering every technical detail. It means developing enough working knowledge to ask good questions, identify credible sources, and recognize when someone's trying to manipulate your fear for attention or profit. Progress looks like moving from AI is taking over everything to AI tools are being integrated into specific applications, with mixed results that depend heavily on implementation. That's not optimism or pessimism. It's clarity, and clarity dissolves the particular species of fear that comes from feeling helpless and confused.